800 years ago, England was a far from green and pleasant land. Civil war was raging between King John and a bunch of rebellious nobles, and among those nobles were the Mordwits, who owned most of the land around here. A photograph of this field showed these rather unusual crop marks. Archaeologists thought they were probably prehistoric, pretty standard stuff. But some amateur archaeologists decided to have a look, and blow me, they found this 12th century building, along with some lovely finds like this weird corbel. Isn't that strange? It was obviously a very important building, but it was abandoned very suddenly. Time team have been called in to help. What was this place and what was all around it? Was it part of the Mordwit estate? And if so, did King John destroy it in an act of revenge? We've got just 3 days to find out. Our site's on what used to be the border between Buckinghamshire and Northamptonshire, near Milton Keynes. Excavations by students at an archaeological field school revealed the building within the smaller Cropmark circle. Pat and Jonathon, who run the school, are pretty confident about what they've uncovered. So after all your hard work, what have you got here?
Well, we have a 12th century building, some 11 metres long by 5 metres wide, 3 equal bays inside. We have the suggestion of a staircase.
This is here?
Yes, that's
Which way is it going then?
And it's going straight up to the side of the building.
I see. What do you think it might be?
Well, the presence of the staircase indicates it could be a first-floor hall. Other possibilities are a hunting lodge or possibly part of a monastic grange.
It's intriguing, isn't it, Mick?
Yeah.
Does that mean we're going to focus our activities on the already existing dig?
Well, there's a number of things we can do, but we need to look beyond the existing dig. In the immediate vicinity in the field, there may be other structures associated with this, as well as the site, the other circle down there.
What do you mean, another circle?
Well, on that air picture, there's this site, and then there's another one just outside this area. And then we need to put the whole lot into the local context. We get Stewart to look at the landscape of the area around.
And we've got our Jonathon here to try and decode what the building might be.
I'll stick my oar in, yeah. I know it's a meaty site, this one. I want to get my teeth into it. If it is a late 12th century building, this is the time when the elements fuse together to make the typical English medieval house. And indeed, if this is a first floor chamber at the end of a hall, then we should be standing in the top bar of a capital T-shaped plan with the hall going off that way. If it's right, it'll be a big discovery, but I must say, from what I see, it looks a bit more like cowshed than two-storey block. So I really want to get in there and have a look.
Because it's a few years since this trench was dug, we've got to re-excavate the building, check the measurements, and see if we agree with Pat and Jonathon's conclusions. That's going to take us quite a while. If it was originally a two-storey building, it would probably have been a manor house with a high-status T-block where the lord lived and ran a large estate. The best alternative is that it could have been a hunting lodge. While we get to grips with the building in the small enclosure, geophys are looking for the larger enclosure further down the field. The crop marks aren't visible now, so they've got to cover a big area. To speed things up, they're using their quickest technique, magnetometry, looking for telltale magnetic variations which can indicate burnt material in a ditch or around a hearth, for example. The previous excavation produced an absolute mound of pottery. Paul Blinkhorn's already identified where it was made and dated it. It seems that the building was occupied for a surprisingly short time.
There's stuff like this, which is from Lyveden, which is up in the north of Northamptonshire. It's one of the earliest glazed industries around here. Gets going around about 1200, 1210, something like that. And then there's this, which has been coming up from Oxford, or somewhere around Oxford. Now, this could be as early as 1080. They've found this stuff in the construction of Oxford Castle.
Oh, right, so giving a very precise date. And what about this bit?
Oh, that's quite nice,
completely flat, almost.
It's part of a fire cover or a curfew. hence the expression after curfew.
Yeah.
It's when you put the covers on the fire. Imagine a big bowl, but upside down, with holes in what would be the base, if it was a bowl, yeah?
Yeah.
You basically put this on the fire at night. It allows the fire to smoulder all night, so you'd have to relight it in the morning.
Labour saving.
Absolutely.
So the site's starting sometime around 1100. We know it's still going sometime around 1200. What about the end?
Well, round here there's a major medieval pottery industry at Pottersbury, which is just 3 miles down the road. This industry starts about 1250. Now, if you excavate a site dating to the late 13th or 14th century around here, you find masses of Pottersbury work, and I do mean masses. It completely dominates the pottery assemblages. There isn't one single scrap from anywhere on this site.
Gosh, so it was completely abandoned.
It must have been.
By about 1250.
It must have gone by 1250, and this site just stopped dead.
Our diggers may find evidence for why the building was abandoned. It might have been because of what was happening on the larger stage. These were turbulent times in England.
In the 12th century, there were some really powerful kings, people like Henry I, Henry II, Richard the Lionheart, and with that power came the ability to tax and to impose fines on people. So that really impinged on people's lives. But we also had some really quite weak kings, people like Stephen and John at the end of the period, and they weren't able to keep their barons in check as successfully, and both of them faced quite major revolts during their reigns.
The Mordwit family who owned this area were Norman nobles who'd been granted, in effect lent, land by William the Conqueror. Their estates included the nearby village of Hanslope. Like many of the nobility, by about 1200 they'd got fed up with the demands of the king. They now felt they owned this land. They were, if you like, becoming at least part English and should have rights over it. But we've got a long way to go before we know if any Mordwits might have lived or stayed in this building here.
Gents, we've got a 2-storey building. That's what we're talking about anyway, isn't it? Clearly, we've got one big wall running down there, going underneath Brigid. Now, where are the others?
Well, the return runs here, at right angles from that wall.
Under your feet?
Under my feet.
Going down here?
Yes. 5 metres down, away from the wall, runs parallel down that way.
So under this bank?
Yes, under this. This is...
OK. So now, is the character of this wall the same as that opposite one there?
No, it's not. This wall is far more crumbly than this one, but there are traces of mortar in it.
Well, that's interesting, because if this is a big chamber block, I'd expect it to be built at the same time and for them to be linked. So I want to see the end walls, what we have of them, and to uncover this. I really want to see this wall.
The wall's been reburied since the excavation, so we just have to dig it up again. Geophys have been looking for the larger crop mark circle.
How have you got on then, John?
We've done a strip of geophysics there.
There's nothing, is there?
We can't find it.
What's the explanation for that then?
It could be that you've got the building there, that's where the activity is. Maybe they were just keeping animals over there, if they're linked.
So what do? Just do more
we need to do more.
Yeah.
OK, we'll do another strip and we'll have another look.
Showing up as clearly as this on aerial photos, Geophys should be able to find it. But at least we can now see the back wall of the building.
Ooh, this is a wall, isn't it? We're getting sensible now.
Ah, no, that's better, look.
Let's have a look at the width, because that one is skinny for me. It's skinny and it's badly built, and I wouldn't want to live in the first floor of a house that had been built like that.
So what did you say your internal measurement was?
It was about 375.
375. Come on, Jonathan, get that tape out. Come a bit square, Pat.
Let's have a look now. 375 we're talking, are we?
375 for runners there.
Well, if that goes from there to there, well, then we might be in business.
We might be in business indeed.
This wall may just be the right size for a 2-storey building. But just as the archaeology is looking more promising, Stewart's piling on the pressure with a whole new set of questions. Do we have any evidence that there was a manor here on the ground?
I don't think we do at the moment. What it looks like is if we've got a building set within an earlier enclosure of another period.
Right.
What we've got is a whole load of these things.
Loads of them, yeah.
This is the enclosure there. These look very typically prehistoric in date to me. In the pattern of fields and boundaries here, I'm not seeing anything which gives me any suggestion there's a manorial site. I mean, there should be a church or a chapel, there should be other buildings, there should be road layouts.
There's a building on its own at the moment.
That's very much what it looks like. We've also got an overlapping problem, that we've got royal hunting forest in this area.
So could what we have be a hunting lodge?
It's possible it could be something like a bailiff's lodge, something like that, an estate manager. At the moment, it could almost be anything, but it doesn't look like it's a manorial site to me.
And as the excavation uncovers more of the walls, it now seems less and less like a manor house to Phil and Jonathon as well.
You should find the width of the wall for a first floor, late 12th century building should be about 4 feet at least, 3 to 4 feet anyway.
And how deep would your foundations want to be for that?
4 feet.
So 4 foot wide and 4 foot deep?
Yeah.
Which looks like we're fairly near the bottom here.
Yeah.
So your foundation's got to come up to here.
Yep.
That seems highly unlikely that that amount of muck has been shaved off there, to me.
Does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
So, if we ain't got a wall that's 4 foot wide and it ain't 4 foot deep, what's that tell us about our building?
Well, it looks more like it's going to be a ground floor one.
But, Pat, you got a staircase.
It was only ever the possibility that it was a staircase. I'm willing to sort of forgo with that idea.
I mean, it looks like it might be actually a lower status dwelling.
Well, we've got to try and fit in where actually the high status stonework comes from.
That's true. It's all to play for, isn't it?
It still is.
Maybe the crucial evidence about this building won't lie in the ground at all, but in the documentary records. It's an area rich in castles and manor houses and the suggestive bumps of deserted medieval villages. It should be possible to answer at least some basic questions in the records.
Okay, it seems to me the first main problem is, what is the name of this site?
Well,
we don't know that, do we?
No. What was it called?
I haven't got anything yet, but I think there are some leads that I can pursue. You know, in the medieval period, it's quite typical for a person to name themselves after where they live.
Yes.
So it could be west of somewhere, east of somewhere. That would be a starting point. That would be very useful.
In the 12th century, this was Buckinghamshire. So Dawn needs to go to the county town of Aylesbury to find the records. Stewart's going too, because it's becoming vital to know whether our site was in a royal forest where special laws applied. We've also got something more to get on with, because geophys have now found the elusive big enclosure.
Look, that's where we did the initial strip, and it just was so weak we couldn't see it. But there's the circuit.
Well, that's
Follow
quite clear
all the
there,
way
isn't
around.
it?
We've got problems with that pylon, the electricity.
Right.
But if you want to put a trench across the ditch, we can mark one for you easily.
I think we need to put something across to see what date that is. We'll only get that by going to the bottom of the ditch.
Yeah, I mean, there's one or two sort of features inside.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe pits, maybe areas of burning.
Give us one of the pits or features inside as well. We'll do that as well.
With these two trenches, we should be able to date the ditches and see if there's any other sign of medieval life inside this larger enclosure. In Aylesbury, Stewart and Dawn are getting stuck into the records. Documents from the 12th century are tough. Maps are non-existent and place names hard to come by. So even working out if this is a royal forest is far from straightforward. But later parish maps can hold clues, and any information could be vital. The only remaining evidence that the building might be high status is the carved stone, such as that weird head, and some metal finds.
The small pieces of metalwork are really quite a curious little group, actually, because we've got the usual things, horseshoe nails and so on, a pair of tweezers, which is quite hard to date, but it seems to have some medieval decoration on it. We've got a coin, probably John, something like that. This knife handle is quite interesting. It's got lovely decoration. It's complete, although it's broken. Might be bone, might be antler, might be ivory.
What about these ones?
Well, this bit is the most spectacular thing. This is the curb bit. It's a horse bit for a small horse that can control it very well.
And what about this?
That's a bit of a problem. Have you
You
any
don't know.
ideas? Because I'm really a bit desperate.
I'm sure our viewers will have plenty of ideas.
It's quite flimsy, made of iron, and we just don't know what it is.
Not a nice building material.
Isn't there? Good mixed bunch here. This one is a beautifully cut large block of local limestone. Norman buildings tend to have smaller blocks, so this is surprisingly large.
Could that be 12th century?
Could be, although it's bigger than I'd have expected. This here, that's a beauty, that one. You see these staring at you in parish churches across the country. Could belong to an arch, might be from a corbel table where the wall meets a roof. Probably 12th century, he's got a skull cap, precedes lusher hairstyles. The decadent 13th century, so nice piece, that one.
So what kind of building are we talking about?
Well, no two stones are the same, it must be said, so they could come from a range of buildings.
So there could be a whole host of buildings in our field.
Oh, yeah.
2/3 of the way through day one, and we seem to have this extraordinary mismatch. On one hand, we've got all those beautiful finds that seem to imply a whole host of buildings, but in the ground, we can hardly find any archaeology at all. I don't know what's going on. And quite frankly, I don't think the archaeologists do either. But at least Matt's now found the ditch around the big enclosure. So far, he's only got more 12th century pot, but he's nowhere near the bottom yet. To settle any lingering suspicion that our building might have been a 2-storey block, Jonathon wanted to see the 4th wall to check its size and construction. It's been revealed, and the judgment is damning.
It's nowhere near big enough, it's nowhere near well built enough. It's only 11'6" wide, 26 feet long. That's not even on the large side of a medieval cottage. And furthermore, these walls are not substantial enough to hold a 2nd story. Probably a thatch roof. It's a cottage.
So suddenly we're downsizing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks more like a sort of peasant longhouse to me.
Oh,
the sort of thing that... I mean, it might still be a wealthy peasant.
But it's not the home of a brave rebel fighting against King John.
No, but what's a medieval peasant living out here like this on his own? Because we've only got one building at the moment.
So what are we going to do tomorrow?
Well, we've got an awful lot of cleaning here, haven't we, Phil, to define this structure.
There's a lot of cleaning to do, yeah.
Well, and do some work out there too?
I think we need to do some geophysics around here, yeah.
So, shock horror, we came here because we thought we got a 2-storey manor house, and after just a few hours excavation, we find it's a peasant's hovel. But that's not the end of the story, because there's all those metal finds. Where did they come from? And all that masonry and that head, what's that all about? Hopefully we'll find the answer to that tomorrow. Beginning of day 2, and this is all really rather embarrassing because this time yesterday I was right on this spot talking to camera, telling everybody how in the 12th century there were aristocratic rebels who were fighting King John, and they were based here in some kind of 2-storey manor house. 24 hours later, it appears there's no manor house here. There's nothing except a peasant's hovel. And last night in the hotel, half of our diggers were so depressed they were saying, let's just pack up and go home, until Mick waded in and said, no, this is archaeology, we've got to get back to basics, which is a conservative phrase I never thought I'd hear you use. But what exactly did you mean?
Well, I think there's still a lot to do here. You talk about this being a peasant's hovel, but I mean, it looks like a medieval longhouse that belonged to, you know, a villain, a peasant farmer. The thing is, they don't occur on their own. You know, it'd be very odd to have one stuck out here in the countryside. They usually come in this part of the world as part of a settlement.
And what about all these strange enclosures surrounding it?
When you see them plotted out across the landscape, as Stewart's done, it looks like an Iron Age landscape underneath this medieval one. It would be very unusual to get circular or oval enclosures in the medieval period. They're nearly all rectangular, square and so on. And of course what we need to sort out there is to date those.
Anything else?
We still don't know the context of this. If this is 12th, 13th century, it'll appear in the documents somewhere. It might be something to do with the royal forest that was at Salsea. It might be something to do with the main manor and the main village, but we'll only get that by looking at the documents.
And of course we've got all the metal finds, we've got great chunks of masonry, and there's over 2,000 pieces of pottery. There may not be a story here about nobles in the 12th century, but there is a story. And a big bit of that story is whether the large enclosure further down the field was part of the same settlement. We've now got 2 trenches open, one looking to date the circular ditch and the other investigating features inside the enclosure. Poor old Victor's been struggling to keep up with our building as it yo-yos up and down the medieval food chain. Victor, this must be one of those nightmare digs for you where we keep changing our minds about what we've got. You must have run out of rubbers by now.
It certainly is. I've got plenty of those.
I think we'll need more too, Tony, because this is what we thought we were looking for, that big two-storey stone chamber block with a large timber hall attached. But, take two, Victor.
That's
Looks
the one
something like that.
This is much, much smaller, isn't it?
Yeah, it is tiny. It's not even very big for a medieval cottage. What have we got of it? Well, a bit of stone footing. That could have taken a clay-bonded stone wall, or maybe timber. Certainly supported a thatched roof. What we'd expect. No signs of tiles anywhere.
Mind you, it is only day 2. Who knows what we'll have this time tomorrow?
That cheered me up. No.
Yesterday, Pat and Jonathon, the archaeologists who dug this building a few years ago, stayed pretty quiet as we reduced their find from a manor to a cottage. But they don't think we've answered all the questions. Our diggers have been saying that you two aren't happy, that actually we're saying, no, there's nothing here, and that's kind of rubbished your work, and there may well be more here than we're currently saying. Do you feel we've misrepresented your work?
No, not at all. We're quite happy that this building is not as substantial as we'd originally thought, but I think we still need to see it in the overall context of what appear to be high-status stonework and pottery, all of which suggests that at some point in this vicinity there was people living a high-status life.
That is what I was going to come to. I mean, so far we have only been looking at the building, but like you say, we really do have to bring the finds into the equation. What I would like to know is can you supply me with a plot of where all these really significant finds are coming from?
Certainly we've got plans, but we'd need to look through them because most of this excavation took around 5 years ago. So I haven't got that information in my head.
I don't expect you to. You didn't know I was going to throw it at you.
Pat and Jonathon are going to plot where all the major finds, the stone, pottery and metal, turned up, to see if they indicate hotspots we should investigate. But Jonathon Foyle has a theory about why the masonry is turning up on our site. He thinks it was a medieval recycling job, salvaged from a posh house or a church after renovation. He's discovered that in this 19th century church, there are bits of a 12th century chapel that used to be about a mile from our site.
There's an arcade here that was taken down from a chapel in a field between here and our site.
And in fact, actually, look, we've got heads. So this one looks, not dissimilar.
Oh, yeah. Offer up your head.
Oh, there we go. Hey, that's very good, isn't
Well,
it?
it's not bad, it's a similar kind of size.
Yeah, just a bit narrower.
And the eye details are there as well. Maybe it's a bit cruder.
Yeah, but not bad at all.
And again, the same sort of hairstyle going on there.
So could this head have come from this actual building?
The stone's a bit rougher, I don't know. Really, what it shows is that masons who are working in this manner were producing work like this, and the stuff that's on our site doesn't have to have come from far away.
If the masonry had been brought onto our site from other buildings, at least it would explain why no two stones seem to match. And Stewart and Dawn did have some success looking through the documentary records in Aylesbury. We especially wanted to know if our site was in a royal forest and if we could name it.
To show you what we've got, this area in pink is the manor of Hanslope in here, with our site right at the top corner. Right. Now, what we've been able to establish is that the site itself actually is within the Royal Forest area of Salsey. This is all part of the forest, and therefore our site will be subject to forest jurisdiction, as it were. Now, the evidence for that is that we've got names like Hanslope Green, which we've been able to identify, mentioned as being within the forest. Right. Salsey Green as being within the forest.
Well, that's right, and I undertook some research into the subtenancies of Hanslope Manor. I came across a family name of Bosenham. Now, they seem to have seem to have taken their name from this northern part of the parish. Just across the parish boundary is Bosenham Mill.
Yeah, we cross that every day.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah.
But I think that name applies to a bigger area. Bosenham literally means Boser's spur of land. Now, the mill is not on a spur of land. Our site is on a spur of land, so I think we've got a real clue there.
So that might be the name of the site that we're doing then?
I think it might well be.
Ah, well, that's brilliant, isn't it, to have a name to attach to it.
So we know that our site, Bosenham, was in the forest in the 12th century. And we also know from the Domesday Book that this was quite a wealthy area, with, amongst other things, a predominance of pigs. Hanslope boasts 1,000 pigs, compared to the handful its neighbours had. But keeping pigs in and around the royal forest had its risks. This was part of a huge patchwork of hunting grounds created by William the Conqueror, which spread across the country. Not even the barons could hunt or farm there without royal permission, and peasants would get in serious trouble.
A royal forest isn't necessarily full of trees. After all, Exmoor and Dartmoor royal forests, there were no trees in them at all.
So what do they mean by forest then?
The term meant a particular type of law applied to that area, and the law was designed to protect the cover for animals, particularly for deer, so they could be hunted.
What sort of punishments did people get?
Well, I mean, cutting trees down and poaching animals, you were fined, but some of it was quite draconian. I mean, they would remove the toes of dogs, for example, so they were immobilised from chasing deer.
How did people feel about these laws?
Well, I don't think they liked them terribly much because it was such a restriction on what they were doing, and they were constantly breaking into the forest, clearing areas of it, turning it over to agriculture, and of course poaching. And this went right to the top. You hear about bishops and abbots and so on accused of poaching and of clearing land.
So do you think the people who owned our manor might have been breaking the law?
Oh yes, and indeed our manor might have started by somebody clearing a piece of the forest and setting up a farm in the middle of it.
So would they have been punished?
Oh yes, I mean they would have paid a fine for doing that, but they might have paid it so often it almost becomes a licence to do that.
With all these laws, it's highly unlikely that a peasant farmer would simply have set up home here by himself. It would have been too risky. But perhaps our cottage wasn't alone in the middle of nowhere. About 500 metres away is the farm where we have our incident room. Now Stewart believes he's found evidence of a medieval moat there.
If you look at this map of 1828, now that is very typically the corner of something like a medieval moated homestead. I mean, it's possibly the residence of, like, the minor gentry. It's not quite the lord of the manor status, but it's kind of levels below that and aspiring to show off a little bit.
Well, how many sites like this are there in the manorial area?
I think there's 4 others recorded in this manor.
Well, that puts our little place down the hill in context, doesn't it? Because if there's one manor, 4 sites like this, each one of which may have, I don't know, 5 or 10 cottages for villeins to tend their land. It's a plausible scenario, isn't it?
So the building may have been a villeins or small farmer's cottage, part of a minor Norman noble's household. But where are the other villeins' houses? In their conquest of England, the Normans had one hugely successful weapon, the knight on horseback. Highly armed, highly mobile, and terrifying to English foot soldiers. Some of the horse kit used by Norman knights seems to have been rather unusual, such as the curb bit found on our site. It looks intriguing, and we want to know how it worked. Tomorrow, we're going to try and find out on a real horse. But first, we need to make a usable copy. Hector Cole's using the same techniques as a 12th century blacksmith. Paul Blinkhorn's helping Pat and Jonathon to map where their finds came from.
510/505, 450 grams.
They know which bit of the site produced each bag of pot.
70 grams.
By weighing the bags, they can plot how much was found where. This is the last lot, Paul.
Oh, smashing, thanks, Sam.
It's a hell of a lot of pottery, isn't it? 2,500 pieces you've already processed, another 2,000 or so from the first dig, and all the stuff that we've come up with in the last couple of days. We must be looking at a very big 12th century site.
Not really, no. We do get an awful lot of pottery at medieval sites in this part of the world. Pottery was plentiful and probably cheap as well.
So how big do you reckon this settlement was?
It's really difficult to say. I looked at the pottery from a village up in the north of the county called West Cotton, and we had 107,000 sherds of pottery from that.
And how many houses were there?
It was 5 tenements, basically.
Why were they using so much?
They just got through it. If you look at anthropological studies of pottery use, the average humble cooking pot probably only lasted a week. Let's say our site was occupied for 100 years minimum. They break 1 pot a week, that's 50 pots a year, that's 5,000 pots in the lifetime of the settlement. Each pot breaks into, let's say, 100 pieces, there's 500,000 pieces.
Come on, put your neck on the line. How many houses do you think we're looking at here?
I honestly don't know. I could easily believe it's only one, I really could.
Bit of a turn-up. Mick's expecting more houses. He could still be proved right, though. Because where Matt's digging inside the big enclosure at the bottom of the field, geophysics results suggested burning.
It looks like we've got a hearth or small oven or kiln there, right at the edge of the trench, and possibly another collapsed one here. But of course, we've only got this kind of 2 metre wide slot going across here. So
and have you got any pottery from it?
More of the same pottery coming out here. It's all medieval, similar to the stuff coming out of the ditch.
Matt, when you said, because we've only got this 2 metre strip, did that imply that you wanted him to say, I want a bigger trench?
I think we should just a couple of metres maybe on each side, and then we can get the ovens or hearth, whatever they are, in plan.
Is that all right if he extends it?
I think we're probably going to have to, yeah, in order to understand what we've got here. We don't even know at the moment whether this has got buildings in it. Looks likely by the pottery and the structure.
Our replica of the curb bit's now ready.
I think that would be called the finish article. If you'd like to compare it with the original.
Yeah, let's fetch the other one up. And then these little knobble bits coming up here are the equivalent of these spiky bits.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, with those spiky bits, it makes it look even more gruesome than it did when it's rusted. Put that one back in there. I'll give that one to you, and then all we got to do is present it to Alan's horse tomorrow and hope it likes it.
See what he thinks of it.
Pat and Jonathan's finds, including the horse bit and the posh knife handle, have now been mapped.
OK, let's start with the bit. Where did that come from?
The bit was inside the building, just over here.
So we can be pretty certain that whoever had that bit actually lived in this building. Now, where about the head?
Well, the head appears to have been just outside the building, I think about here.
It could have been in a little niche set into the gable end and literally toppled out. Whoever was living in this building undoubtedly had the head. How about the knife handle?
Knife handle is further away still. It came out.
So we're kind of losing that connection between the building and the owner of the knife handle, right back there.
In this section here, yes.
And Paul's worked out that there are 2 concentrations of pottery. Usually, big deposits of broken pot are found in so-called middens or rubbish pits. 2 middens could mean 2 houses.
What we've got is this massive spread of pottery and domestic refuse right up against the wall of the building. Just where you'd expect to find a domestic midden.
Now, suppose, I mean, one of the things we were deliberating about yesterday was where there might have been a doorway.
I'd say from this, there must have been a doorway in this wall. Nearly always the midden's near a door.
You just go out and chuck it out.
And chuck it out, yeah. That's basically what they did.
I like that. What's this?
Well, this is another concentration of pottery. There's about 10 kilos in this one. Obviously, it's not the size of this midden, but it's still a decent concentration. I'd say that's another midden.
Now, the only other thing that strikes me is where's the ditch coming in?
Well, the ditch seems to come in around there.
So we're looking at a dump in the end of the ditch, maybe.
We are.
So, no evidence here for a second house. And amazingly, Jonathon Foyle's now decided to question whether we've got a house here at all. Mick, I know you think this is a pig of a site, but Jonathon has come up with a fabulous theory that might ease your grumpiness a bit.
OK, day one, I said it's a meaty site, OK? Yeah. Now, the theory is this. No one actually lived here. It's a pig processing plant.
Right.
Come on, justify this.
OK.
Given the rubble that you've got in front of you.
It's very small for a house, OK?
Yeah.
Could still be, you know, peasants' small hovel or something, but I'm suggesting pigs are brought in, possibly water heated, scald the pigs, you know, and dehair them, and then maybe this is some kind of a smokehouse. Those weird metal clamps we found might just be for pigs' legs.
Now, when he told me this, I thought it was brilliant. You're the professional, how does it feel to you?
The thing that helps, I think, is that in Doomsday Book, for this particular manor, they record 1,000 pigs on the manor. you know, using the woods for grazing and so around it. That's a hell of a lot of pigs to have around.
And what's this doing here? Which is the only hearth we've found in the entire place. It's not in the middle, as you might expect, but it's slightly outside the building.
Do you buy the idea of it leaking its smoke this way into the house?
Well, you feel where the wind's coming from now.
Over there,
It's
without
coming
any
from
doubt.
behind
Yeah.
us. So prevailing
Yeah.
winds from the southwest, you put this at the southwest corner, it's going to blow the smoke into the building, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's in the right place.
It's all pretty plausible, isn't it?
Yeah.
What an interesting journey. In 2 days, we've moved from a manor house to a long house to a pork scratchings factory. Where are we going to end up tomorrow? I don't know. Beginning of day 3 here near Northampton, and we've done just about everything we can up this end of the field. We've sorted out the house, there's modern field drains running through the medieval ditches, and when we examined the finds they didn't give us any new leads, so now we're moving everyone lock, stock and barrel right down the far end of the field, where things are looking much more promising. It would be odd for a medieval peasant's building to be on its own, so the search is on for a wider settlement. We've got 2 trenches, one to date the circular ditch, and a big one investigating features inside the enclosure. Mick? 8 diggers in 1 trench is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think we're getting somewhere as well.
Where are we getting?
Well, here we've got lots of blobs on the geophysics. And so we've opened this area. This is where Matt was working in a narrow trench over there yesterday.
Yeah.
But now we're getting all sorts of burnt areas, bits of pottery, 12th century, stuff like that. So it's sort of looking like occupation, I think.
So much interesting stuff coming up, but
There is, yeah.
can't interpret it yet. What's this thing here, Bridge?
Well, you can see, Tony, that's a very circular-looking structure. Got these great pitch stones all the way around the outside of it. All the stones really heat-affected. It's surrounded by a lot of burning, discrete areas of charcoal, so it's definitely looking something like a hearth.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in a way you'd expect that to be in a building, and I think by cleaning it back, we might well see where the walls or the perhaps beam slots to support timbers or something like that.
Yeah.
This is what you'd expect to be in medieval houses, with the pottery and everything as well.
Well, comrades, I don't want to get on your case, but we have about 8 hours left.
No problem, Tony.
So, early promise down here, but it's probably going to take Bridge and her comrades most of those 8 hours to get the full story. Our replica curb bit's ready to be tested. The original was unusually small, only 4 inches wide. We've got a lineup of pint-sized war horses, courtesy of Grafton Pony Club.
This is the size that fits at least 1 or 2 of these ponies, which are the same size as Norman cavalry horses.
I find that hard to believe at the moment.
What's your pony's name?
Bobby.
Bobby. What size bit does Bobby need?
5 inches.
But look, if that is a 4-inch bit and that's a 5-inch bit horse, then that must be for kids or something like that.
Your Norman knights rode ponies that were about 12 hands in height, Phil.
Oh, you're laughing.
No.
You've got to be.
No.
Look, they're big warriors. They've got enormous horses.
Have a look at this. Look where the men's feet are. Look how close they are to the ground.
But can't that be artistic license?
No, because we have excavations of bones from horses that scaled up would have been for a 12, 13 hand maximum pony. Oh, sorry, Bobby's too big. Sorry.
Wow.
Hello?
What's this one called?
Callie.
Callie?
Yeah.
No, don't think it's going to fit.
No?
I think a likely looking candidate is here. Hello.
Oh.
What's your horse's name?
Murphy.
Hello, Murphy.
At first sight, Phil thought our bit looked like an instrument of torture, but the Normans seemed to have known what they were doing. Murphy accepts it without fuss.
He doesn't seem to be objecting too much.
No, I'm amazed.
We've prepared your war horse, Sir Philip.
What? Is that all right? Yes. All right for me to get on your horse, is it?
Do you need a hand up?
To you, Tony, this must seem like a mighty charger.
It will to you in a minute.
Exactly right.
1, 2, 3.
Cool.
Hey!
Oh, hey! Way, I'm up here. Yeah, I am up here.
Okay.
Of course, stone of crows.
Or if Tony was a Saxon in a shield wall,
yeah,
you know, he's still an intimidating sight, isn't he, bearing down on you?
You surf! Yeah!
Phil has never ever been on a horse before. He's so chuffed, it may take us a while to get him back to the site.
Oh, magic!
We started out with just one building, but it's now becoming clear that Bosenham was a busy place. Pot and bone from the circular ditch show that people were also living down here in the 12th century at exactly the same time as the building was occupied.
I can see that there are all of the main domesticates. Here we are, cattle jaws, sheep jaws, pig also, and there's even a bit of horse here.
So does that mean they're eating horse then?
Well, no, they wouldn't have been in this case. Horses are big, there's lots of meat on them. So rather than just wasting it, it's much more sensible to butcher it up and feed that meat to the dogs.
So this is the original knacker's yard sort of thing?
Yeah, that's right. It's all butchery waste. It's the sort of smelly, nasty bits that you're not going to eat. You don't want them up by your house. You're going to shove them off as far as you can, and sticking them in an enclosure ditch is the perfect place.
What about the pottery then, Paul?
The dating's very tight on this. It all looks to me like it's 12th century. There's these with the roller stamping on.
Yeah, that's very nice, that one there, isn't
I mean,
it?
that's very typical of the 12th century Shelley wares.
Oh, right.
There's no glazed wares at all. The early glazed wares we're getting in the early 13th century, they're just not here. And an assemblage of this size, I'd be expecting to see the odd sherd or two.
So nothing beyond 1200,
I don't think so, no.
Oh, right.
We still don't know why this site came to such a sudden end. It may be that the area stopped being a royal forest, which had been one of the causes of the quarrel between the nobles and the king. And our peasant farmers would have been caught up in these turbulent struggles. So why did people around here revolt against King John?
Well, I think it was largely because of the imposition of various fines for individuals who transgressed forest law, and that was obviously very relevant in this area.
Do you think the people around here would have known the local rebels?
Absolutely, because the Lord of the Manor of Hanslope, which is the manor in which our site's located, was one Robert de Mordwit, and he was one of the barons who rebelled against John. And because of that, John sent one of his henchmen out here to burn his castle to the ground. So the people in our site couldn't fail to have known about that.
So far, our site appears to be entirely medieval. Mick had suspected that the crop marks were originally prehistoric. Phil's now found the bottom of the big enclosure ditch and can settle this.
Have you got the bottom yet, Phil?
Unusually, the crucial dating evidence is not at the bottom where you'd expect it to be.
My feelings are that it's probably was cut as a medieval ditch and is medieval. Now, we had a piece of pot about there.
Right.
Which I think is going to date all of that.
Right.
There's no break in the sequence. Yeah. If this material down here is Iron Age, then you would expect somewhere about here to get a break, a turf line or something like this, and then the medieval goes in on the top. But you haven't got that. There is no break in there. So I think it's one continuous story right the way through.
So it looks as if we're going to have to accept that the whole thing's medieval then, and there's no prehistoric there at all.
The crop marks have surprised everyone by turning out to be medieval after all. But then no one knows much about medieval pig farms. It's in the right location, in forest, where pigs would feed. Perhaps the large enclosure was a pig pen with a deep pig-proof ditch round it. The real purpose of the forest wasn't to feed pigs, but as a playground for the Norman aristocracy. We can now see how that intriguing curb bit helped them to fight and hunt. Norman knights used long reins to move their hands around freely. The curb bit actually softened the violent movements of the rider's hands, so that he didn't yank the horse's head off when he swung his shield or spear.
Now, come on, Alan, this ain't hardly fair. This morning you had me on this puny little horse. You got this whacking great thing. That's not fair. What are you playing at?
It's not the same horse, Phil.
Well, I know. Is it the same bit?
It is scaled up.
I haven't actually seen this. I've only seen the rusted up original. How does it actually work?
Our take on this has changed so much from the first day where we saw it, when we thought we're going to get arrested if we put that in a horse's mouth. Far from it. It's actually a very humane cleverly designed piece of equipment. This is obviously swinging, and you really have to yank it right up before you get any sort of lever action inside the mouth. And it's designed so that I can also manoeuvre my shield in battle around as a defensive and an offensive weapon, whilst not gobbing her in the mouth.
Because you're holding the reins in the same hand.
Because I'm holding the reins in the same hand.
Yeah.
The curb bit wasn't just for the battlefield.
So why exactly am I holding this piece of rope?
What we're going to do is a hunting game, because this site, as you know, probably saw a lot more hunting action than it did military action. And this curb bit is as useful for hunting, where I keep one hand free as well, as it is for war. We need a target, we need a boar to run away.
And I'm the boar.
You are the boar. You tow that sack, you run like bejabbers, I come after you, and when you feel a spear hit the sack, stop.
Now then, if there are any last requests, I can't think of what they are now.
Run for your life.
Doesn't it, eh?
It does.
It does snatch.
While Phil plays with the Norman nobles, Matt and his workers have been revealing what the villeins and peasants of Bosenham were doing. Inside the big enclosure, they've uncovered a medieval workplace. Good job, Matt. What have we got?
Well, we've got a large post hole there, another enormous one here.
So presumably they were posts supporting a big roofed building?
Yeah, huge. I mean, these are really substantial, and it still had the remains of a scorched post in it as well. Got another shallow post hole there, another one with packing stones there, so we may have even an internal wall going up that way.
And what's that?
Well, this to me looks like a small collapsed oven or kiln of some sort, vaguely circular. You can see it there. Over here, we've got a much better example of what I think that probably looked like. Beautiful circular oven or something there, still in quite a good nick. And over here, we have another one. This one's slightly more collapsed, but you can see the base of it is all scorched and burnt. And going round this area here is this ditch, which comes along here, round here, and goes off to the corner of the trench over there.
Lots of finds.
Yeah, a huge amount of really beautiful finds here. I mean, look at that jug handle.
That's
gorgeous.
Gorgeous. And a heck of a lot of activity going on here. This settlement of pig farmers at Bosenham has given us an unfamiliar glimpse of ordinary life in the medieval manor of Hanslope. Powerful nobles, such as the Mordwits, grabbed the headlines of history by quarrelling with the king. But the story of Bosenham is really the history of ordinary people. Pig farmers who grazed their animals in the forest and slaughtered and scalded and smoked them in the enclosures. Remarkably, this dig has taken our archaeologists into uncharted territory, because almost nothing's known about medieval pig farmers.
We know that they had specialised cattle and sheep farms in the Middle Ages called beccaries and vaccaries. So why couldn't there have been specialised pig farms as well, which I suppose would call something like porkeries?
Well, if we've done nothing else over the last 3 days, we've invented a new word.
Possibility, isn't it?
When we came here 3 days ago, we thought that we were going to find a medieval hall complete with elegant masonry, but the reality turned out to be rather different. Less high affairs of state and more of this. That's really good pig. Very nice.
To ensure you catch all the latest updates, please do subscribe to this channel, follow us on social media, and sign up to our newsletter, and join us on Patreon.